Hi Booktube, Aaron here, and I hope you're doing very well. Today I'm going to be going through some of the plans, at least that I have at the moment, for my reading next year, both in terms of a few books that I'd like to get to, in terms of general areas that I'd like to look into, and a few potential projects. But also just generally, I want to think a little bit about my attitudes towards reading, towards how my reading interacts with Booktube and with things like Goodreads, and how I log my reading and things like that. And so hopefully this will be a nice overview of where my mind is at the moment with some of those topics. And it'll be good to hear if any of you have any ideas, or if you have any plans of your own in this department. Then yeah, please let me know what you're thinking at the moment. But we'll jump in and just talk a little bit, I think, about where I'm up to at the moment with my reading. I've been noticing this year a few things. One is a massive increase in the amount of poetry I'm reading, or at least the certainly the number of poetry books that I'm finishing. So that's a good thing in my book. I think poetry, in terms of books finished, and probably in terms of time reading, has made up about half of my sort of reading diet this year. And that's something I'm happy with. It's something I'd like to keep up. I think I'm happy with that kind of ratio. And then the other thing then in the non-poetry side of things, with the other half of my reading, has been a dip, at least in interest in fiction, and yeah, more of an interest in either non-fiction or in poetry. That's really where my mind is. That's where I feel I'm being pulled to more. Um, and so I'm sort of wary a little, even though there's going to be a lot of fiction coming up in some of the stuff I've got here in front of me for next year. I am a little wary about my relationship to fiction, and I'm hoping at least to kind of investigate that, I think, a little bit next year. Try a few things and see what sticks, and see what excites me. And so yes, I think that's where I'm at. I've also noticed I'm reading, in terms of books I'm finishing, a little bit less. And me and my wife Jasmine were just chatting about this, and there's probably a number of things. One of the times I used to read a lot was on the train, and I'm not able to read as much on the train at the moment. I have been reading bigger books, and probably more sort of non-fiction, and more books that I need to slow down and concentrate on, and things like that. So that it just meant that in terms of the number of books I've finished, I've read less. But it still felt like a very full and substantive reading year for me. And so I'm not really going to focus too much on that number of books that I've finished this year. But I'll go into the ongoing books, the books that I'm in the middle of and will be carrying on into 2026. And we'll hopefully be picking right up as we go. So a book I'll be hopefully picking up later today, that I've had sitting around for a little while just because I didn't have the space to keep going with it, was Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. And I was really enjoying this. I was this far through, and back in October, Steve Donahue was doing a read through of this book, a read aloud on his channel, and I would listen to him and I would read along in this, and was having a lot of fun. And for, I think, reasons of his own, he wasn't able to do it quite as regularly through October as he wanted to. It spilled over a bit into November, and then he realised that he didn't really have enough time left in the year before he goes off, into hibernation or whatever it is he does. There wasn't enough time for him to finish this. before that, and so he just put pause on that. He might come back to it next year, he might not. And I've just decided to get straight on back with it, because I I don't particularly like having books hanging around that I haven't finished. So I'm gonna go back in, and probably tonight I will resume Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. And if I find I have a lot of fun with that, then I've been meaning to make my way through the Palliser series, so I might read one or two other Palliser books later on in 2026 as well. Then another ongoing project, me and my friend Alan from the channel Big Hard Books and Classics have been very slowly, in a kind of on and off fashion, we've been making our way through the cantos of Ezra Pound. I'm about maybe a quarter of the way through, coming up to a third of the way through. And I enjoy reading the cantos, but it takes a lot of effort, a lot of attention, a lot of rereading, a lot of researching and looking things up. So it's very slow going, and I have to be in the mood for it. And so it's going to be an ongoing project, and I'm committed to reading more of the cantos next year. But I'm also perfectly willing for it to spill over into 2027 if need be. I'm just going to go as slowly as I want to, and we'll see how far Alan's sort of happy to go with it as well. And then another thing that I've had sitting around for a while, it was one of my projects for last year, and that was working my way through The Anatomy of Melancholy by Robert Burton. And again, like the cantos, it's one of those things that when I'm doing it, I'm enjoying it, and I'm very much in the mood for it. And it's just, if I go through a spell of not reading it, then I really have to wait until I'm really in the mood again to pick it back up. So you know, I've gone through long spells without reading it, and then around halfway through last year, I decided just to put it on pause, because there are so many other books I wanted to read, so many other big books that I wanted to make my way through, and so I put it on pause. But I want to get back to it early next year, and even if I just put aside one night a week or even one night a fortnight where I focus on reading just a few pages and seeing how far through I get. So that's one of the other ones I'd like to get to. And actually, yeah, no, there is actually quite a lot to go. So they're three ongoing books that I'd like to get to. Going on from there, there's a few books that are sort of early books to sort of, I don't know, get me going in the right direction, to get me to sort of find myself, find the lay of the land early on in the year. And in terms of non-fiction, there are two books really that I want to prioritise and want to get to as early in the year as possible, so that I can sort of work out where I want to follow up on them with. The first of those is a book I've been meaning to get to for a while, and it's The Balkans by Misha Glenny. And I'm thinking that I'll probably start this quite early in the year, and maybe even at some point in January, maybe I'll start The Balkans. So that's one early possibility. The other one that I'll probably wait until I've finished The Balkans, will be The New Roman Empire by Anthony Kaldelis. So it's a book on Byzantine history, and I'm quite interested in Byzantine history. I've been sort of Byzantine curious since probably around the pandemic, when I was sort of trying to work out, how do I put it into words? I was trying to think of how important initially the fall of the Ottoman Empire is to the world we live in today. I think mainly thinking of the Middle East and the mess that has been created there in the last century or so. And I was trying to work out, to what degree, what was the sort of the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the the sort of the catalyst for a lot of what then happened, or could you maybe go back further? And I've been trying to work out what was more important, and maybe it's not really a more or less important sort of issue, but what had more effect on at least Western society and the Western mind, the fall of the Ottoman Empire or the fall of Byzantium, about 500-600 years beforehand. And sort of from there, even though it was really a digression, I got interested in sort of working out what even was the Byzantine or Byzantine Empire, and just started digging in there a little bit, and really got into the History of Byzantium podcast, which I think around certainly through 2021 and 2022 I would listen to a lot, and I've read Judith Heron's sort of short history of Byzantium, and the fall of Byzantium, or the fall of Constantinople by his name was just in my head, and it's just gone out again. Stephen Runciman, and I enjoyed them, but really wanted to get a really thorough look at the period and at the culture, and it's something I keep putting off and meaning to get a bit deeper into, and so I really want the New Roman Empire by Anthony Kuldelis, which is, Anthony Kuldelis is one of our greatest living Byzantine historians, and so I'm hoping that that'll be a great catalyst for that and will give me inspiration and a few suggestions for other places to go next after I've finished that. Another idea I have for early in the year, just to, again, as I was saying, to edge around fiction and work out what I want to be doing and what I want to focus on in terms of fiction. I thought I'd go back to an old friend, and read something that I can just read every now and then, in little, just read little sections every now and then, and slowly make my way through it. And so I want to reread the collected fictions of Borges, and I think the plan is really, because it's it's selected from different books or collected from different books that he wrote throughout his lifetime. I would like to read sort of one book per month. So in January, I'll just read the first 60 odd pages, which is from the Universal History of Iniquity. Then in February, read from fictions, and so on and so forth. And I think that'll keep me going for the first, for about 2/3 of the year, I think. And so it won't, and there'll be some months where they'll be much shorter and some where it's longer. But he's a writer that I love, and would like to spend more time with, and that seems to be a fun way of just sort of keeping him there throughout the next reading year. And then the other thing I've forgotten to pick up, so I'm going to go get it. So this is one that you've seen a couple of times, and I've talked a little bit about why I want to spend time with this author. But again, early on in the year, I'd quite like to get to this anthology of Simone Weil's writings, mainly because it's been one of those instances where a writer has come up repeatedly in my reading, and I'd quite like to follow up on that as soon as I can, but then also taking into account that there are all these other things I want to read. I'm currently in the middle of a few things. And so what I'm thinking is I'll probably get to this probably before I dip into Anthony Caldelis and the New Roman Empire. I'll probably read the Balkans around the same time, and dip into Borges at the same time. So probably all of them I will start after I finish Trollope. So that's sort of, what the immediate future is looking like, the kind of tone I want to set for the beginning of my reading year in 2026. And then I got a few projects and a few books that I'd like to work my way through. One project I've been promising that I'd do for a while, I haven't got to yet, and I'll do it sort of as soon as the mood strikes, I think. Will be Homerathon, and it will be quite an undertaking, I think. But it's to read both the Iliad and the Odyssey in two translations. So I've got the Emily Wilson translations, so that the Iliad, translated by Emily Wilson relatively recently, and just before that she put out, a few years before that, she put out her translation of the Odyssey, which I've read before. So I wanted to read both of those together, but then I also want to read the, and again the name's gone out of my head, but I've got some other translations of the Odyssey that I'd like to compare it to on my Kindle. Slightly annoying that the specific translator I have in mind to compare her to has gone out of my head. I think it's going to be the Fagles, actually. So I'll be reading the Fagles translation on my Kindle, and I will be reading the Emily Wilson in these physical editions. And I'm still not sure how I'll do it. I'm not sure whether I read the Emily Wilson ones together in one block, and then read the Fagles in one block, or whether I read them side by side, or alternating, or I'm not entirely sure whether I have an Odyssey month and an Iliad month, something like that maybe. But it's a considerable amount of reading, so we'll see how that goes. I still haven't quite straightened it out, as you can tell. Another reading project that I've got in mind, that again I've mentioned before, and I just need to find the books to finish it off, will be to read through everything that Alice Oswald has put out. So Alice Oswald is one of my favourite poets, probably my favourite living poet. She's in fierce competition with A.E. Starlings in that department. I love her poetry. I'd like to read, in a year, everything that she's written. But there are two books that I've yet to pick up by her. There's Sleepwalking on the Severn, and there is her Weeds and Wildflowers as well. I think both of which I've seen in secondhand bookshops, sort of years ago, and just didn't pick them up at the time, but would like to get them at some point in the coming months, so I can just read through her work in chronological order. So I still have the first one, The Thing in the Gapstone style, so I can at least get started. And then on to tons of fiction for a bit, I think. I think one for when I'm really in the mood for just sort of luxuriating. That's my word of the day. I said it randomly earlier in the day. But yeah, when I feel like just lounging with a novel and just immersing myself in it, I feel like it's really a series of novels. I want to spend time with the Avignon Quintet by Lawrence Durrell. I know I love the Alexandria Quartet, so I have it on good authority from I think a few of you who have read them, that I'll enjoy them as well. And so I just need to get into them at some point. And I think it's just when I want to but when I have that feeling of just falling into a book, then I think I'll do that with the Avignon Quintet and just read them all in one go. And then the next one is a bit more of a project, will maybe be a little more demanding, but we'll see. I might be surprised. But that's Moby Dick, sort of literally a white whale of mine that I've been meaning to get to for a very long time. And then just recently I was reading some of the poetry and short stories of Thomas Hardy, and I would like to get back and read more Thomas Hardy. I'd probably start things off with The Mayor of Casterbridge and then see where it goes. But he's one of those sort of priority authors for me that I would like to spend more time with, and certainly in 2026 I'd like to spend some more time with him. As a book to sort of cheer things up a bit, so I want to have this in my back pocket for when I need something sillier and a little more humorous. I've picked out Stella Gibbons' Cold Comfort Farm. And by the way, a lot of these books are from a much longer list of books that I noted down as books to try and get to in 2026. But I'm sort of just deciding to play a little more free and loose. So these are the ones that, the creme de la creme that sort of floated up to the top of the list. This is certainly one that I'm sort of earmarking as a book to get to if I feel like I need something to lighten the mood a little bit, or if maybe I've hit a wall with non-fiction and just want something, a little more fun. And then next I've got Blindness by, is it Jose Saramago? Yeah, Jose Saramago. And again, I've just been putting off reading Saramago for a long time, for no good reason. And I've heard that this book is very good and would like to get to it. I would like to read more by Saramago, and I keep stopping myself from picking up more of his books because I still haven't got to this one yet. So that's one I'd like to get to, so I can buy more of his books, or not if I don't like him. And then sort of sticking with some translated fiction that I'd really like to focus on. One big one for this year for me would be to finally read Gargantua and Pantagruel by Rabelais, and it's just one that's been around for a while that I'd like to get to, and I've heard it's very good and quite funny, we'll just see how it goes. But again, like with Stella Gibbons and with even Jose Saramago, it's one of those books I want to keep in my back pocket for when the mood strikes, and I feel like it'll fit in just right. And then we'll finish off with just some more books of poetry that I'd like to get to. I think a number of these have been in some of my most recent book hauls over the last few months. Starting off with Horace, his complete odes and epodes. Again, just a poet I've wanted to get to for a long time. And I think he's also a kind of stand-in, along with the Homer project, to have the ancient world as something floating around, as something I want to just dip in and out of more regularly next year as well. So I've been meaning to just read more ancient works this year, and it just hasn't happened as much as I'd like. One that I picked up very recently, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. Again, a poet I've been meaning to get to for some time, and found this, recognised it. I've heard a number of people say good things about it, so I'd like to get to Wendell Berry relatively soon. Another poet that I've been meaning to get to and has sort of been pulling me a little bit, but I don't think I'll get to immediately, but we'll see, is George Safaris. I've got his collected poems here, and this is translated, edited and introduced by Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherrand. And then yet again, a poet that I've just been meaning to get back to. So I've read him before and felt like I needed to sort of slow down and zoom in a little bit, and that's John Ashbery, and I've got his self-portrait in a convex mirror, which will probably, yeah, I think this will likely be the one work by him that I would want to prioritise in 2026. And then the last project that I've got, which again I mentioned recently in the book haul video that I just made the other day, will be a Yeats project. So I'll read through the complete poems of, or the collected poems of W.B. Yeats. There are a few things missing in here. And I also recently picked up a guide to his poetry as well. And so I'd like to read the two of those in tandem and just get to know Yeats's poetry, more broadly, to have read him broadly, but also hopefully to sort of zoom in on certain aspects of his work as well. So we'll see how that goes. But in terms of individual titles and projects and things like that, that's where I can see my reading going, at least initially next year. And we'll see how much of this I stick to. Because I think in terms of, as we sort of segue into the end of the video and a brief discussion on my attitudes to reading, I think one of the things I want to do, which sort of flies in the face of a video like this, will be to play a little more fast and loose, to not be too rigid in what I read, and sort of generally that's sort of how I go, but I want to lean into that much more. And I think one of the things I want to change to help that and sort of nurture that quality of my reading that I've noticed for a long time but have been kind of holding back a little bit, is to change how I log my reading. So at the moment I'm on Goodreads, and I'm also on Storygraph, both of which I use to log my reading, and I will continue, I think, to log each book I finish as I finish it. I think what I will stop doing is I will stop logging it on both the Storygraph and on Goodreads as soon as I've started it, and certainly with Storygraph, pretty much every day I tend to go in and update the pages I read as well. And I want to kind of get out of that a little bit. I certainly want to stop measuring and sort of quantifying the number of pages I read every day. And so that's something that, although on one level I find a little satisfying, I'm just going to try and let go of it and see what comes of that. But certainly I want to just not log when I've started a book, and just log the books that I finish. And that's so that, if, say, I pick up a book like Anatomy of Melancholy, and I've already marked this that I've started it, so imagine this is some other book, and I just decide that as much as I have enjoyed reading it, I'm unlikely to finish it, and I'm happy just to leave it, then I can just leave it, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter anyway. But not logging that I've started the book, I'm hoping will be a way to sort of signal, at least to myself, that it doesn't matter at all if I don't finish a book. And it's also hopefully going to help cultivate something that I enjoy doing and don't do as much, and haven't done as much since I started it's something that I haven't done since I started Goodreads and Storygraph and stuff. And that's just dipping in and out of books, picking up random anthologies, just reading random poems or short stories or essays out of collections, and not worrying about reading an entire book from cover to cover, because not every book is really designed to be read from cover to cover. And at the moment, with how I'm reading, with really Storygraph and Goodreads, more Storygraph than Goodreads. Goodreads is a little more in the background and is more for me to see what other people are reading um, rather than the other way around. At least that's how I think of it. Um, yeah, they're very much directing the kind of reading I'm doing, and I would prefer to take back the reins and see how it goes. So that's the big, one of the big changes. So what I'm gonna do instead, and it's not a complete instead, because I'm still gonna be using the apps to log the books I've finished. I like those sorts of stats and things that you get at the end of the year on Storygraph and things like that. And obviously, with the way I'm changing things, those stats are going to look different. But that's okay. But I'm going to have to log them in a book. So that's my first plan, is to have a section of a notebook where I'm going to log down every book that I read that year. And I'd also then on sort of the next, if I have a couple of pages for the books I read each year, and I'll put down the date I start and the date I finish. And then following on from that, on like the next couple of pages after those pages, I want to keep a list of all the books that I've bought that year. And I want to see how they measure out, because I tried doing that a little bit last year and sort of lost counts, sort of lost which pages went where and stuff. I didn't have a dedicated space to do it in. And so I'm going to hope that's the first thing, is to have a dedicated space in a notebook to log books read and books bought, and then I can balance the two and see how that's looking. The other change in my reading, which I've already started, and it's to have a little pocket notebook with me at all times when I'm reading, just to note down, any quotations, any sort of sections from a book, any lines that stand out. And so far I've been doing this in this little pocket notebook, and I've always got a little pencil in here and a little elastic band so I don't lose my pencil. And it's just been very, very simple. I've just been writing down the quotation itself, the page it's from, and which book it's from as well, if there's any overlap between books I'm reading. There goes my pencil. And then the other thing I've been doing, which I never really thought to do, but just started doing, is then on the last page to start writing a little index of each book that's mentioned in this notebook and what pages I can find any scribbles I've got relating to that book. And so that way I've got a nice reference of the quotes that have stood out to me, because I'm really terrible at annotating books, and sometimes I've had certain notebooks that I've used as sort of commonplace books or general notebooks, but they've always been bigger notebooks, and they've not necessarily been books that have been easy to keep with me at all times, to take with me on public transport, to just have on my lap or next to me on the sofa as I'm reading or something. And so far this has been the most comfortable way for me to keep notes on my reading and to do that consistently. And so we'll see how it goes, and it fits nicely into my little book bag that I always keep with me when I go outside into the world. It's got room for a couple of books, my glasses and my notebook, and that's me happy. So that's the other change, and I'm going to see what effect that has on my reading, on how I talk about what I read. Certainly one thing that annoys me is when I lose pages, that I want to discuss. Like sometimes I might want to read something out when I talk about a certain book in a video, and I can't find the quotation because I'm a terrible annotator and have never really found a way of doing it that works for me, and I think this is what's going to work. So we'll see how that goes, and whether it progresses at all through 2026. And so there we go. That is everything I think that I wanted to talk about. Please let me know if you have any plans for your reading in 2026, and if you think your reading might be changing or anything like that, or whether it's very happily plodding on in the same direction it's been plodding on in over the last, 50 years or however long it's been. So anyway, I'll leave it for now. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.